Hi guys, welcome to episode 4 of ABC OC TV. We are so excited to have Shauntelle Sposto here today with us. She is a wedding photographer who's actually been in the industry for 15 years, so we're super excited to hear everything she has to share with us today. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So first question, when we tell people we are in the wedding industry, the first thing people ask is, oh my gosh, how did you get into the wedding industry? It sounds like such a dream, which, is such a cool thing to say we're a part of. So how did you get into this?
Well, I started really young. I started when I was 19. Oh, wow. I was in college, and a friend of a friend was shooting weddings. She was like 28 years old, and I was just freshly out of high school, and she asked if I would come and like hold bags and assist her, and I just thought that sounded so glamorous to be a photographer's assistant. Yeah, so I started volunteering with her just for fun, and the first wedding she brought me on was just a dream. It was just the most fun day. I felt totally VIP. We got backstage access to the bride and the groom all day long. We got treated really well. And I just loved the idea of being hands-on all day and documenting someone's memories for the rest of their life in a fun way. Back in those days, it was a big photojournalism era, black and white, really fun. This was in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so I guess for me, it was just the attractiveness of being a part of a beautiful event, taking these incredible pictures of these moments that are never going to be forgotten. So I started assisting her on the regular for a couple of years, and slowly but surely started taking on my own clients.
Nice. Was she film as well?
Yeah, this is back then. There wasn't really, the digital age hadn't really hit yet. Yeah. In my college years, when I went to school for photography, there wasn't even a digital department in my university. Wow. So we had to shoot film, and she was 100% film shooter.
Nice. That's really cool. How long did you work with her before she gave you your first wedding?
Well, I worked with her, probably for maybe a year before I started taking on my own clients. And my first clients were fellow students from my university. Yeah. They were friends. They were friends that maybe couldn't afford a professional photographer. Yeah. So, they were paying me what they could afford, and I was happy to take on any job and every job. Basically, I would say I probably assisted for about a year before I started taking on my own clients.
Nice. That's relatively quick.
Yeah, I kind of was motivated to do it pretty quickly. It's easy for me to learn in the field, and I was going to school for something completely different. And so when I was doing all of that, seeing another person be successful in a field and watching them, face to face, watching them build a small empire, I was like, I can do that. Yeah. It sounds amazing.
So what would you say sets you apart from other photographers?
Well, I think the length in the industry is definitely one of the first things that sets me apart, because a lot of people our age have been in the wedding industry for like 5 or 6 years, but I can say I've been in the industry for almost 15 years. Wow. And I've just been able to see the wedding industry change and move the way a lot of people in our position haven't had the opportunity. And it's just because I was introduced to it at such a young age. I think the other thing is that I did start with a film background. And although we shoot film and digitally with our business, most of what we shoot is film. And we've been able to kind of incorporate that into like the modern digital age and keep that alive.
So tell us about the evolution of Sposto Photography.
Okay, so like I said, started in like college years, started taking on friends and family as clients, slowly transitioned into larger weddings, got connected with planners and things like that. Now, I was young, so I was in school, I was working other jobs. I didn't really know if this was going to be my career or not, but I was good at it, and I felt like there were so many other things I was interested in. There were things I was educated in that I could have pursued. But I felt like through the years, photography was always something that I came back to and never burnt out on and never got tired of. And so working other jobs, I bartended, I waited tables for like 10 years, all the while kind of always shooting weddings and engagements and family portraits, babies, maternity, newborn, all of those things in the background. It wasn't really until about 5 years ago that I decided that I was going to take this full time. Okay. And so for somebody like myself who got established young, I didn't pursue it 100% since I was 19. Because I just don't feel like you know who you are when you're 19 and you really know the direction. Some people do, and like good on them. I think that's amazing that they know their vision ahead of time and they can just follow it through for the rest of their life. But for me, I had to explore other avenues and make sure that I had exhausted all other possibilities of things I was interested in before I settled down like in my 30s. Like, this is what I'm doing forever.
So what is your favorite part about being a wedding photographer?
Well, I think to start off, a little bit about me is since I was a little kid, I've always been like the kid with the disposable camera, always taking pictures. Every trip we went on, my parents had so many rolls of film and so many disposable cameras. We'd go to Hawaii and just come back with bags and bags of cameras and rolls to develop. And my favorite thing was going through all the images after and keeping them in shoe boxes, which I still have, keeping everything safe, keeping it all like close to my heart, remembering things about my life that I wouldn't have without photos. As a kid, my life was heavily documented. We have tons of photo albums of photos of myself and my family from since I was born till now. And I just feel like there's a lot of things I would have forgotten had we not have taken so many pictures. My parents weren't diligent about that. And so I think my favorite part about being a wedding photographer is that I get to do that for other people on a special day of their life that's incredibly important, that they put a tremendous amount of thought and love and care and design and memories, and the people that are the most important to them are there. And to be able to kind of capture that and keep that as a memory for them, it seems so natural to me to do that for people. And so I don't think that a lot of people are like my family. I think there are a lot of families who didn't document their lives. And it's a luxury to have a professional photographer follow you around for a day, but it's so necessary. And I think on whatever level of wedding that you have or whatever level of budget you have, having somebody there whose sole purpose is just to make memories or to capture memories for you is so valuable, because there are moments that are going on behind you, on the sides of you, in different rooms than you're in different areas that you're not in as the bride and groom. You might be off with family while your friends are off having cocktails, and all of those moments being captured that you wouldn't have known are going on. It's a way to remember that forever, and I think that's super important.
That's a really cool way of saying it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use that when I'm talking to my couples.
Do it.
Selling them on getting a really good photographer, because it's so important. As coordinators, we know, we look back at the photos and I'll notice lots of things that just weren't even captured, or moments that I didn't even know about, like you just said. And that is true. There's so many things simultaneously going on at the same time that you just can't capture all at once unless you have a photographer. And I'm sure you have a second, third shooter too.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the size of the wedding, absolutely. I think too, just kind of understanding your importance as a documenter. We live in a super digital age, and as photographers, we're preservationists. We kind of preserve history in a way. You capture it forever, and it's fleeting. Everyone has a camera now. I always say, like, the best camera is the one you have in your hand, and that could be your phone. It could be anything. So everything is so heavily documented. Billions of images are being taken every day. That's incredible. Yeah. But back, when our grandparents were alive, it was such a luxury to have even just one photo taken of you. And even those, maybe they don't have every single moment documented. And if they did, maybe that's amazing for that family or for that person who had the luxury of doing that. But I have my grandparents' wedding albums in my home, and my parents' wedding albums in my home, in my office. I keep them, I show them to my clients, and I say, this is why what I do is important. It's not because, oh my gosh, I have so many Instagram followers, or oh my gosh, I got to work with so-and-so, or oh my gosh, the budget's so big. It's about like saying in 50 years, what are you going to show your grandchildren? Like maybe your child is going to have an album, your album in their office. Like we don't really think that far ahead. And the only reason that keeps me thinking that far ahead is the fact that I have that family history documented, and I get to cherish that. And I like looked at what studio took that picture. You know, it's etched in the corner of the image, and it's etched in the corner of the album. And I'm like, oh, this weird East Coast photography studio in the 30s made this photograph for my grandparents. And like, how amazing was that business then? And maybe in 50 years, someone will be looking back at my business and saying, wow, this crazy Sposto Photography studio made these images for my grandparents 50 years ago. What an amazing business she had at that time. I think that's kind of...
I love that.
I love that.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I feel like that you have a really strong brand, and thinking of it that way is so unique, and I think that's really special for clients to hear.
I think so too. I think it's something that's not talked about enough. Because we just get overwhelmed with Pinterest, and we get overwhelmed with Instagram and all the blogs and magazines that we're published in, or whatever that we desire to, as wedding vendors, we desire to be a part of. And I really think like that's all beautiful and important, and that all kind of memorializes everything we do, and it helps us climb the ladder in our industry. But at the end of the day, like those will be fleeting, and those people won't remember these weddings as much as the families themselves. And like the years, I have wedding clients from 15 years ago who have 15-year-old children. They're like baby adults, and they're now seeing photos that I was taking of their parents, and like it means something to them now because they're like teenage children. Like to think ahead of time and be like, how will your work be remembered, and how will what you did for the couple be remembered? It's going to, because time passes and people grow up and kids grow up. And so whether you're doing family photography or you're doing weddings or whatever, having those memories for the rest of your life is huge. And that's also why I'm a huge proponent of printing your work and making sure that like albums are created, or prints are being made, or things are being framed. It's really not just like an ego boost. It really is, because if they live in your computer forever, you won't enjoy them as often or as much as if they're up on the wall, the way that you guys have images up in your walls in your business. So,
I do have a question. Like when you're booking a couple, or you've already booked a couple, and you're talking about the timeline or how many hours they need you for a day, I always come up with this with each couple where they start with like 8 hours.
Right.
And then I really suggest them to do 10 hours, or they start with 6 hours, which is crazy, but they just should at least have 8. But they ask me if they want to stay limited, if they should start earlier and have you end earlier, or if they should have you start closer to the ceremony and then have you all the way to the end. I usually more push on having more time at the beginning, because I like the getting ready photos. But what do you suggest, and how much time do you think is appropriate before the ceremony starts?
Totally. Well, we're unique. Sposto Photography is unique. Since I started, and I can thank my, previous mentor from years ago for this, I kind of was instilled with this idea that when you commit to a wedding day, you commit to the whole story. And so I don't have hourly packages.
Oh.
And I do that on purpose. Now, of course, there are clauses in our contract that protect us from the 2-day coverage, 25 hours of nonstop coverage or whatever like that. Of course, we max out about around 10 hours, but and that protects us from people taking advantage of things like that. But I think when I educate my clients about the importance and the relevance of why I'm there, I think it's nice to be able to offer them my services as a whole, instead of just for an hourly rate. And I think that works for me, It doesn't work for a lot of other businesses, and I completely understand that. I know we're unique, and I know people would just freak out if they knew that, or if they tried to do that themselves. Like, it would never work. I've just been really lucky with my clients where I feel like it's important to say, hey, I'm going to arrive a couple of hours before you step into your dress to get the detail photos and the moments in the morning, and I'm going to stay through the formalities of your reception. If that runs later, if that runs early, that's great. But just know that I'm going to be there. If things run late, I'm not going to have a conversation with you at 8 o'clock p.m. because you didn't cut your cake yet and you're going to have to spend a certain amount of hours to keep me there. Now, I understand, like, I'm sure people watching this, and I'm sure you guys even hearing this, that sounds like a nightmare because, you know, we all do need to get home to our families and respect our time, you know, and maybe that might change for me when I have a family of my own. But for me in this position in my business in the last several years of my business, I felt like it was important to just commit to everything. Now, that doesn't mean I stay to the very bitter end, but if there's a formality later on in the evening, I'll stay for it. And if it ends up maxing out like way beyond my limits, then we have a conversation about it. And then there's compensation if needed. But my point is on the wedding day, you know, I'm not going to be putting my clients in that position being like, oh, well, we were only hired for this long, so what do you want to do? Like, it's time to go. I just think that that's not a position I want to put them in. That's not a feeling I want to leave them with on the wedding day. Yeah. But to speak to your question specifically, I do think the beginning parts of the day are very precious. I think people are excited. I think the energy is different in the morning. It's, of course, crazy, awesome, different in the evening as well. People are partying, people are dancing. But for photos specifically, you know, once you get a couple of glasses of champagne in you, or whether you drink or not, towards the end of the evening when it's open dancing and people are just partying down, I think at that point, getting a big portion of the dancing is important. But after a while, you get sweaty. Your makeup's spent for the day. Yeah. Your hair is all over the place because you're, you know, dancing your heart out, and people are getting, people are getting people are getting drunker. People are having fun. Yeah. At that point, they're kind of tired of camera in their face all day. Yeah. So I kind of gauge how I end my evening based on how the wedding party or the bride and groom is receptive to me. At some point, they just kind of like, we're done, we're out of here. Like, you are good. We don't need any more photos. We're just gonna dance our hearts out and just be able to have those last moments to themselves. So that's why I would say, like, it's not as important for us to stay till like 1 a.m. because at that point, no one's really loving the way that they look in the photos anyway. I mean, if you think about the images that are used and printed and put in the albums, it's very rarely like the end of the night photos. There'll be 2 or 3 wedding album spreads of them getting ready, but there'll be 1 album spread of like a dancing photo, like, you know? So
I like your rocker.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it is. So yeah, I mean, you have to think about what you're going to use the images for and what you want to remember. Now, that's totally different with every client. Because I have a client who is like, we know we want you like well over 10 hours. So we had an agreement and they went ahead and compensated for an extended period after hours coverage kind of thing, because the dancing photos are the most important to them. So knowing your couple and knowing their priorities, I think, is the most important thing about like what they're going to be receptive to, because your couple might not really want photos of themselves getting their makeup done, but they really want party photos. Yeah. That's just going to be up to the couple. But for me, on the general, I would say I agree with you, Kelsey, that the beginning parts of the day tend to be used more. The photos are appreciated more.
So to speak on, having more time to do the details, I know that you are definitely a advocate and very, very good at those flat lay images. So tell us a little bit about that process and, whether you bring your own styling kit or not. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know those images are super important. I think they're important for the couple to have memories of their printed materials, of their personal items. The trend in the industry right now is that beautiful flat lay. I think it's been around for a little while, but the strength of your styling ability is becoming more and more important in the wedding industry. And I think as a photographer, having that skill makes me more valuable than someone who might not value that skill or have that skill. And I know that we've talked about this before, and having the privilege to speak at the last event and demonstrate my styling ability and show coordinators and planners what the standard is or what is expected from photographers and planners is super valuable. So I do bring a kit. I think it's valuable for anybody to have any physical kit of tools that's going to help them make the best of whatever their product is. You know, if you're going to be the one styling, having a styling kit is super important. I know it's just as important as having safety pins or Band-Aids for you guys, or a stain remover, or a needle and thread. Or those things are important for coordinators and planners to be able to be there in a pinch to help things that go sideways. For the styling elements, those moments can go sideways for me too. Sometimes I'm in a hotel room and they have this really crazy loud purple and green carpet or striped pillows everywhere, and it's hard for me to find a surface to lay, you know, all the invitations or the shoes or the rings or the jewelry. It's hard for me to find a surface to do that on. So bringing my own, boards or linens or little things to help me have a clean surface to work on saves me a tremendous amount of time. That's me dodging a curveball. If it's not provided for me, it's nice to have something in my back pocket that I can bring out and use, and that helps me be a stronger stylist in the images that I'm composing. You know, essentially, we're artists and we're composing shots. So I occasionally work with stylists who want their art to shine and their styling abilities to shine, so they come in and style it for me, and then I'll photograph it and compose it and light it beautifully, and that's beautiful. But a lot of the times you guys are working, you know, you're not in the hotel with me, or you're setting up for the rest of the day, or there's not an assistant that is a strong stylist that's with me. So if that's the case, then it's my responsibility, because those elements like the shoes and the jewelry, that's the only time I'm going to have access to those elements before the bride's wearing them. So if you want the shoes photographed, I need to have the ability to style it well so that those shoes are documented, and that, you know, we all have those beautiful moments that are beautiful images that kind of help tell the story. Now, not every bride is going to be like a lay flat detail bride. And there's not every designer and not every florist and not every shoe designer is going to say, I want my shoes laid on a flat board. I think it's important to not only do flat lays, but also to document all of those items in use. Like, I believe a dress should be worn. I mean, obviously, you know, versus hung. Sometimes people desire the dress photo where it's hanging on a beautiful doorway or an archway or whatever. And I think those photos are beautiful. And I think those photos are important. But I also think it's important to document the dress for the designer on the body of the bride, and not just have it like, you know, for portraits where the bouquet is blocking it the whole time. Sometimes taking detail photos of the gowns and of the shoes while they're being worn is important. I've had a florist tell me that a bouquet should be held and versus being put on a chair. Like, if I'm going to photograph and document the bouquet, you know, having it documented well while it's in use is just as important as laying it down and photographing it as a detail on its own. Mm-hmm. So doing both of those things is important. So when it comes to your styling tools, I think it's important to bring a mix of your own, maybe neutral items if you have to fill in the blanks somewhere. Sometimes I don't have a ring dish, or maybe I have a black Zales ring box that maybe doesn't necessarily look to theme for the wedding. Yeah. So I bring like a selection of ways to display the ring on my own, and if it fits the theme of the wedding, I will of course photograph it with that element and without. But it helps me fill in the blanks on a styling level, that if maybe they didn't have enough of the ribbon to, like, for me to style with, I have a color that's similar. Or maybe maybe there's a wax seal on the invitation, but they didn't bring the stamper. I have one that looks similar, so maybe I would use that. Or a calligraphy pen. Just certain things that I think would add to the photograph. that would show things in context for what it is. So having my own things really helps me in a pinch. I would say that is super important. And so if you wanted me to speak more specifically about what I have, I can. But I think the stamps, the vintage stamps.
I actually went to the postal office.
Yeah. Did you know?
Yeah, well, I had to go to change my address because I just moved.
Oh, okay.
And I was there, and then I saw the stamps, and I was like, oh, Shauntelle, I have to get
some stamps. Yeah.
And I got some ones that were in theme or featured. Like there was like a boutonniere one out right now that's really cute. But they always have like the old Hollywood ones.
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think is super important to have in your back pocket as a stylist or as a photographer are stamps. Sometimes I'll get an invitation suite and it doesn't have any stamps on it. Or the stamps that they have is like an American flag or something like that. And I mean, unless you're having a red, white, and blue themed wedding, sometimes that American flag stamp just kind of throws off this beautiful, like blush and gold, like hand calligraphed invitation suite. Yeah. So having something like I have a little selection of vintage stamps that I've collected over the years, and you can set them on or tape them on, or I have a little piece of like sticky putty underneath, and so I can reuse them. From the
I want to know specifically what it is. So I can go buy it.
I think the putty that I use is the kind of putty that you like can put underneath your plates and trinkets if there's like an earthquake.
Yes, my family.
It's like
really into
styling putty or something.
So, yeah,
it's sticky, but it doesn't make damage on
Home Depot.
Home Depot, yeah. And then I also use dental wax.
Yeah,
that's the one I was thinking. You were thinking of.
Right. That's for like sticking the ring so you can hold
it. There's clear dental wax. I know it's the weirdest stuff, but I mean, it really helps if you need to like set something up straight. You can buy it at Target. Yeah. Target is not paying me to say this.
No,
you can buy it.
To lift things.
Yeah, you can buy. I buy little tiles that I can create dimension with, and I think that that helps with the professionalism of the styled suite. I think it brings an interesting. It's interesting to look at. It's pleasing to the brain. To have something multidimensional, and also to as Jen Simpson designs, a beautiful invitation designer, says, it brings hierarchy to the suite. What is the most important piece, and how close to the camera should that be? And I think that's the main invitation. So it brings hierarchy to the suite. So shout out to Jen.
I thought one thing stuck with me that you said, because sometimes I struggle with doing the suite myself, and I think too much of it. But one thing that you said that came to my heart was, like you said, think of it as a mood board. This is like the mood board for the wedding, which we do all the time. So that kind of made it an easier concept for me. So you said like bring in swatches or bring in all the different things that bring the theme together. Just put it all together to show the diversity. And
that's exactly right. Yeah, you can use whatever that it is that if you have other elements of the wedding, like the escort cards, or maybe there's like a tossing, like confetti or lavender seeds. Maybe there's other elements within the day, or maybe there's something on the snack table. Maybe there's themed cookies. Like anything throughout the day, you can incorporate into a flat lay. I mean, you don't want to make it too complicated. Sometimes I steer away from maybe putting the shoes next to the invitation on a shot. I don't really know if like the invitation and the shoes fit. I know it's a super popular shot, and sometimes it can be done really well. But sometimes it looks like somebody's walking on top of the invitation. And
that just kind of, that was such a good point. You know, you would never walk on pretty stationery.
Right. So sometimes, I mean, if you like that shot or your bride likes that shot, you absolutely say yes and you do the shot for them. But I would also remove the shoes and maybe put some other elements. I think all the paper goods should be photographed together and broken apart too. And then if you're doing just like one themed layout shot with maybe the shoes do fit the theme, you know, and it fits like everything's rose gold or whatever. I think doing things as like a large whole, having a little bit of everything in a really big, beautiful shot is great. And then simplifying it and photographing each element on its own is important too. Just the invitation suite, just the shoes, just the jewelry, you know. I don't think the garter needs to be in every single shot, you know. I think having a variety, once you start with the big one and you start kind of taking away, I think it's super important to like see the simplicity of all the items that you've And then when you tell the story, like with the photos, either in a blog post or in the gallery or in a publication, or like if it's published somewhere, you can see all those elements that tell the story side by side. But the image itself, you can have one that's all together and then some that are just simplified and set apart.
So obviously this industry is amazing and, we have dream jobs, but, there are obviously some challenges sometimes. So What would you say is the most challenging part of being a wedding photographer?
I think one of the most challenging things that I face with photography is just the fact that everyone has a camera. Sometimes at the wedding, at the event itself, I'm competing with all the Uncle Bobs and all of the other people who have these beautiful professional cameras and want their opportunity to shoot the bride and groom as well. One of the biggest things I struggle with is people taking pictures during the ceremony. On their cell phones, grandma with her iPad.
I literally saw an iPad that was this big last weekend.
Yeah, and on one hand, I feel like it's very important that people get a chance to document the wedding their own way, just the same way as I grew up loving to document everything. I don't want to take that away from anybody. And so that's why I don't encourage my clients to say no cameras or anything like that. I think it's lovely. The more photos that you can have of an event, I think is an incredible gift to have. Like, the documentation is there professionally and in an amateur way. Everyone's got their phones. I think the hardest part about that, however, is just them in my shot with their cameras out or with their phones out. Because when I'm documenting the moment, it's like, well, there's your guest. I'm documenting that they were there, but they look like this. And they're behind their phone, and then they're looking at the photo that they just took at your ceremony, and they're on their phone during your ceremony, experiencing the real moment through a screen barrier. And I think that that's not only unfair to yourself as a viewer, as a witness, as someone who's experiencing the wedding day, I think it's unfair to be documented that way. I don't think that's not a real interpretation of who you are as a person. Like, you don't want to be the guy with the phone in your hand or the girl that's like texting during your ceremony. You can't really tell what you're doing when you have a phone in your hand. So it's unfortunate that you are this person that's leaning out in the aisle instead of sitting there being in the photograph, being documented as someone who's observing instead of leaning out with a phone in their hand or standing up with an iPad in the back. And I know when I get married, I will want a beautiful representation of what the ceremony looked like with all of my guests sitting. Like, even if it was the back of their heads, like I know who's going to be there, and I'd rather them not be leaning out or standing in the back where they wouldn't be a part of the photo, trying to document the moment themselves. So I just try to encourage people to say, yes, they can have photos, have their cameras out, feel free to take as many photos as they want, but be discreet. Be discreet and or maybe hold off and experience, just for the ceremony alone, experience the moment through your eyes and enjoy being a witness and be a witness, be present. I think that's important.
Yeah, it's a very pleasant way to go about it.
Yeah, I love that.
Sometimes I'm like, sit down.
Yeah.
Put the phone away.
Yeah, streaming it on an iPad. I'm like, I'd ask this guy.
Even after the officiant announces, please put your phones away.
Sure.
Yeah, be discreet. That's a great way to put it.
Discreet, yeah. I think everybody's allowed to have a photo. You want to put it on your Instagram, I get that. I think it's important to be able to do that, but being discreet and being polite and just having phone etiquette at a wedding is important. Maybe we don't need to have signs that it's like, no phones allowed, unplugged ceremony. Maybe we just need to remind people how to have etiquette. Like, maybe that's what we've lost is people having phone etiquette more than it is having their phones at all,
So, Shauntelle, I know you travel the world doing photography. I know you just got back from France, but where is your favorite locations to shoot and why?
Well, my family's Italian, so I am naturally drawn to Italy. I've been there. I was there twice last year photographing, and I felt this feeling of being home. Like I belong there, like somehow I'm from there. I guess I am through the generations, but I think it's the most similar to California light. So on like an aesthetics level, It's easy to photograph there. I feel like it's very similar to the light that we have here, especially in like Tuscany. I know Italy's huge and there's different light everywhere, south and north. But where I've been I've been through Rome into like Perugia, the area in the middle, up through like Marche, like the East Coast. Everywhere kind of that I've been, I just felt like it was a really familiar light. It was like a familiar aesthetic. Also, it's incredibly beautiful and ancient and just unlike anything we have here. We don't really have the history in California that Europe does and that Europe offers. So my easy answer is Italy. Here in California, though, I mean, we're really spoiled. We have this beautiful golden light. We can pretty much shoot all day long, depending on what look you're going for. I try to find places that are lush with greenery. I try to find places that do have a little bit of history, classic architecture. I know we shoot at the Mission San Juan Capistrano often.
That's exactly what I thought of.
Right. I mean, that's a very popular photo place. I know everybody shoots there. But I have to say, like, for my personal aesthetic and style and the love and the light that I am attracted to, I feel like that is a great starting point. That was a great place for me to start as a photographer to get this beautiful European look, especially if you're trying to break into the destination weddings market. I feel like it's important to try to find those kinds of venues that are local in your backyard here in Orange County, so that you can bridge the gap between your destination work and your California work. And it's not just, here's all my local work and then it looks starkly different from all my destination work and it's like just a product of the location. I think you can find those really romantic, beautiful locations here, right here in Southern California. I've had the privilege of shooting at a lot of private estates lately, and that has been like my new favorite thing. It's because, the public doesn't really have access to these incredible like, mansions and estates, properties that have beautiful staircases and gorgeous lawns and everything's beautifully manicured. And I didn't grow up in that world and in that wealth, so it's a treat for me to be able to be on those properties and look at them as you would approach a beautiful Italian villa or a chateau in France or something like that.
Alrighty. What is one misconception about wedding photography that you'd like to share with the world?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good question. I feel like the biggest misconception is maybe that photographers are pushy, or that they're not going to get everything. I feel like I've heard horror story after horror story after horror story. Being a wedding photographer, people just seem like, especially parents and family members, they tend to tell me, oh, well, my wedding photographer this and my wedding photographer that. I feel like the common fear is that they're going to be super pushy. It's going to be all about them, that they're going to make it about a photo shoot instead of a wedding. And I think that hearing those things have helped me with my business kind of adjust things, be like, you're right, it's not about me. It's not about I'm the art director of the day, essentially, with the stylist and with the planner. However, it's not a photo shoot. Yeah. It's a wedding. And it's super important to remember that it's someone's wedding and it's not about you. And it's your job to make everything possible and get all the shots you need without making it about you. So I hear that that's kind of a misconception. I hear that a lot of people are disorganized, that maybe during the family photo portion, photographers not being able to take, photographers not being able to take control of that portion of the day and get through it so people can leave and get to the party. It's important to have a list that you can go down and that you learn people's names and that you're not just, hey, blue dress over here. Can you move over? I need you, It's important to be like, hello, Mrs. Smith. I'd like you to join us for a photograph, please. Yeah. I think that's important. And knowing who people are very impressed by that when you know their names. Even if I'm just reading it off a list, like I know the mother's name is Carolyn, so I'm going to say like Mrs. So-and-so or Carolyn, can you come with me? And that strikes a huge chord and it allows people to listen to you, and you can demand their attention that way. So being organized is important. I think that's something that people struggle with, or like a fear that they have that the photographer is not going to be organized. Or maybe that the images might get lost or something like that. That's another big fear that people have. Well, what happens if we lose the photos? What happens if, we like you go home and all the cards get erased or all the film gets lost in the mail or whatever. A common misconception is that, your photos aren't going to be safe. And I think if you hire a professional, that's why the budgets are the way that they are. I think that's why photographers price themselves out specifically in a way that provides people the security of trusting them, is having like a business, not a friend, having a business represent your wedding, having someone who has a good backup plan in place that has backup options outside of their office, either in the cloud or, off campus, off site somewhere, having the images in multiple locations, making sure that you have a system in place to protect yourself and your client for loss of imagery. Because that's another huge horror story I hear all the time is my photographer lost my images. And what a devastating thing to ever say. And let's get some wood to knock on that will never happen. But, I think if you put enough pieces in order for that security puzzle, then, there's the percentage of the reality of somebody losing their weddings is very low. Wedding images is very low.
So I like that. I like that you said like the security, like basically you're pricing yourself out because you're not just like charging for your service, but you're charging for the security and like the trust value. I love that.
I think trust is huge. I think trusting your photographer and trusting like the professionalism of their business. I see it all the time. Every single friend that I've ever had, and I know this is such a bold statement, but every single friend that I've had that has hired a friend that was not a professional photographer to shoot their wedding, something along all those things I just said went wrong.
Yeah.
Something. Maybe they didn't lose the images, but maybe they didn't know what they were doing when it came to family photos. Maybe they were great on the day of, but they didn't back up their equipment properly. Or maybe they just didn't know what they were doing and like fumbled around with the timeline and then you didn't get to dinner on time. I think that there's so many elements working with planners, working with other professionals that have taught me how to do weddings and how to be a professional at weddings, that is important to make sure that you're investing in someone you can trust in that way. I think my heart breaks for all those mistakes that, and you have to start somewhere and learn. But I don't think maybe jumping into weddings for your first gig alone is maybe the right way to go. Like if you're learning how to be a photographer and you're on a student level or you're just trying to wing it or figure it out, maybe assist another professional first. Maybe don't take it into your own hands because you're risking a lot for your clients. You're risking a lot by not really knowing what goes into it. And even just calling up a professional and asking questions is better than just jumping in on your own because you think you have a camera and you can take pictures and you're good at it. And, there's so much more that goes into it that is the reason why people have these fears.
Shauntelle, what does a typical day look like for you?
That's a good question. It changes so much. Being self-employed, I'm sure you guys know too. Some days are like days off. And some days I'm just running around like a crazy person from meeting to meeting to meeting. My day always starts off with walking my dog. I have a little 4-year-old kind of 40-pound pit bull mix who's just this little floppy snuggle dog. And I always take her out and make sure she's good and fed and everything. And then I usually sit down on my computer for emails and make sure I'm getting everything out that I need to get out and responding to the people who need responses. And then typically there's usually some sort of morning meeting either with a client or a Skype interview or lunch with a planner, or maybe we're talking about a wedding that's coming up. And then I usually spend the rest of the day at my computer editing and getting everything, out to my clients in a timely manner. And then if there's a shoot that day, it's always in the evening. Typically will recommend, unless it's an indoor studio style of shoot, I typically will recommend that we shoot about an hour before sunset or 2 hours before sunset if it's like a 90-minute session or depending on what we're shooting. But we'll go to the location early, get set up, and then use that beautiful 2 hours of the remaining light of the day. And then I come home and I usually go to my favorite local wine bar and have a glass of wine and hang out with some friends that are usually always there, and then I go home, and then I go to sleep, or I have more wine, and I go to sleep later. I know. And then some days I'll, be like for a wedding, for instance, to get up super early and like get ready, and then get breakfast somewhere, load up all my gear, make sure all the batteries are charged, make sure all the cards are wiped, everything's packed in the car, gas is in the car, like address is loaded in the GPS, pick up my assistant, head to the wedding, and then that's usually what we're doing for the whole day. Weddings are long days for us because we're unlimited time. I know, it's super unique.
For V and Charles' wedding.
Yeah.
You were there the whole day.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I think it's just depending on, people's comfort level. This is mine.
So if you weren't a wedding photographer, what would you be doing?
That is such a hard question to answer. I went to school for music. Originally, I was a music major. And so for most of my life, I thought I would be a professional musician. And I dabbled in singing and playing professionally, before I went full-time with photography. But I just didn't love it the way that I love this. And so I would say that would be the easy answer for me to say, but I don't know if I would pursue it knowing what I know now. But I do have a very special love for the service industry and restaurateuring, and I feel like I would probably own a cocktail bar or a speakeasy or somewhere that would be a social gathering place to have people enjoy beverages and maybe some small plates and just have like a fun creative establishment in an artistic community, probably in Long Beach or somewhere up and coming.
I can totally see that. You should do it.
I should,
Next
maybe.
business adventure.
Yeah, definitely. Side adventure.
Thank you, Shauntelle, so much. That was super insightful.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for watching episode 4 of ABC OC TV. We would love to hear your suggestions and feedback for our next interview. Just comment down below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you did like it, and subscribe to our channel. We make videos every single month. And we hope to see you at our July 10th meeting, which is going to be boots and bonding, wine tasting, and line dancing. Super fun. I'm super excited. So we will hope to see you there, and hope to see you in our next video. Bye. Bye.